historic rounds of the Neon Dynasty Championship have begun. This is round 4. I'm currently 2-1, just losing to Sean Emmanuel Depra. But the hits, they just don't stop coming here. I'm up against Ken Yukuhiro, famous Japanese brewer extraordinaire. Ken is like someone that you can almost always count on to have like weird and interesting decks, and has like an impressive resume when you consider that he basically always builds his own decks. And this time is no different in Historic. I'm playing the Golgari food deck, a pretty stock list, one that I didn't test very much with, so I'm very like eager to see how I can actually do with this deck. I'm kind of nervous like that maybe I just like don't get this deck enough because I have not practiced much with this specific version of food. And I did play some test games against Phoenix and against Control and like the decks we expected. But no. Ken is not on that. He's not even on like any of the like fringe decks we've seen before in Historic. No, he's on Mardu Midrange. Not in Standard, right? Like Mardu Midrange was like one of the best performing decks in Alchemy. I mean, not Standard. In Alchemy. No, he's doing Mardu in Historic here. And this is quite the weird list. If we break it down here, there's a lot of things going on. So I'm gonna try and like break it down briefly, but it's a Thoughtseize deck, right? It's a mid-range Thoughtseize deck with Bone Crusher Giant, right? So it has these like Fatal Push, Lightning Helix, Vanishing Verse, just like good efficient removal spells and pieces of interaction. On top of that, it also plays like this new card, Reckoner Bankbuster, which is kind of like a Maze Mind Tome, but also allows the deck to go aggressive when it needs to. So I'm assuming that's a bit of the game plan here, that we are trying to play an interactive game plan and have card draw, but still with the ability to go aggressive when we need to. There's also 2 copies of Graveyard Trespasser to kind of like work into that mentality. And supporting like these, creatures and card advantage engines, we also have 2 different planeswalkers that both make creatures, and in that way great card advantage. The Emperor and Sorin, 3 copies of each. 3 copies of Emperor is like very crucial when it's open deck list, right? That I feel like this deck would be a lot better in closed deck list than it would in open, which is generally true of a lot of brews. Like they lose a lot of their value when the opponent knows what's up. So anyway, like all these card advantage machines and ways to grind out. And then on top of that, and I think this is also very important to mention, is 3 copies of Hidetsugu Consumes All. Now this card, it's another one of the new cards. It's a saga that says, first chapter, destroy all non-land permanents with mana value 1 or less. 1 or less, so it just destroys like all 1-cost creatures and like artifacts and so on, and all like tokens. Every single token gets swept up by Hidetsugu Consumes All. Then second chapter is to exile all graveyards. So between the Trespasser and the Hidetsugu, there's actually like quite a bit of ways to attack the graveyard in this deck. And then it flips into like a 3/3 trampler that grows every time it deals damage to the opponent. On the third chapter of this one. But the main thing here is that the chapter 1 is really good against the food deck, because it's gonna sweep up all the ovens, all the food tokens, all the ravenous squirrels, and the cat. And there's no way that you can like sequence it in a way where you end up with a cat in play after this. So if you don't have a food token creator to follow up the Hidetsugu Consumes All, the second chapter will just go ahead and exile that cat from your graveyard as well with the second chapter. So playing against this card, there are now like an actual sweeper for this deck, and you really need to be cognizant of that when you sequence out your plays. You need to remember that you cannot just like spam all your engine pieces on the board. You need to withhold at least 1 way to make food, and preferably a way to rebuild after the Hidetsugu Consumes All. When I look at a deck like this, my process is generally to like try and figure out what are the weak spots. Which of my cards do not have very many answers from the opposing deck. So like that makes me know like what to prioritize during mulliganing and when I play. It's really hard to know because I'm not gonna get to have test games to actually see which cards perform better. But something I noticed is that Ravenous Squirrel is safe from Vanishing Verse, and if I can like maybe like set it up to be kept safe from Bone Crusher Giant and Lightning Helix, that might be pretty good. The issue is though that there is still like Fatal Pushes and 2 Baleful Mastery in the main deck, which is also a wild inclusion. I'm kind of surprised by that. But I assume like it's just a way to kill Teferi, like it's just, you know, exile a Planeswalker, and it's the best of the options. But also Hidetsugu consumes all, hits my squirrel. So I probably can't go too much out of my way to make my squirrel dodge these cards. However, Trail of Crumbs. There's only 2 Vanishing Wars. It's the only answers to Trail of Crumbs in the deck, and then like Faulties, of course. So Trail of Crumbs is also one of the best ways to like rebuild after Hidetsugu consumes all, because yeah, it doesn't get swept up by it. So again, if I can have a food producer, making sure to keep that in hand, I would probably be able to rebuild from a Hidetsugu as long as I have a Trail of Crumbs going. So that's going to be like one of my main priorities here. But basically, I just went like through the list in my head, like which cards are actually matter a lot and what should I look for. Stuff like Deadly Dispute as well could be really nice, just having raw card advantage. And especially sometimes like countering a Bone Crusher Giant if it tries to kill one of my creatures, and I can just like sacrifice it, draw some cards. Stuff like these interactions are things that I want to look out for. When we go to the sideboard here, on top of the Hidetsugus, there's also 2 Farewells. So that's gonna be a bit tricky to navigate around, but other than the Farewells, there's not really anything else that's like really important. There's like Rip Apart, which probably comes in, and like maybe not a Trespasser, like who knows? Like, you know, there's not much sideboarding here against food, and I assume that this deck was like, part of the way it was constructed was with the presence of green-black food in mind. Ken is on the Japanese team who brought the food deck last time, so I definitely expect him to be prepared for this matchup. Which is definitely the advantage of playing a brewer, right? Because he has played the matchup before, what I have not. He's of course running the risk that like his deck might just be bad, which is always a risk when you play a brew. Like almost regardless of how well you do in testing, it's really hard to be sure that your deck is actually good. And obviously, if there's a different, because I know that green-black food is good, right? Because it's like just been this tried and tested machine. So at least I have that going for me. Even though there are like these factors that I have to work out on the fly. So let's see how I managed to do that against Ken Yukuhiro here. Also known as Death Snow on Arena. So I do win the die roll, pretty happy about that. Don't have to like start from behind, but I have this interesting hand here. So one thing I've learned about the food deck is that most of your hands are gonna be 2 to 4 lands and like castable spells, right? Because you're Lurrus deck. If you have 2 lands, you can cast all the spells in your deck, like most of the time. So oftentimes you're just gonna open a 7-card hand and be like, I'll keep that. That doesn't work for this deck. Because this is a highly synergy deck that really needs an engine to come together, and has a lot of cards that don't necessarily do anything. And you're gonna have to be very aware of the matchup that you're playing. So I would say like a big tip for learning how to play this specific food deck is getting comfortable with mulligans. Because this deck is a Lurrus deck, it doesn't need very many lands to come together. It has these like great card advantage engines to like get you back on cards, and it has Lurrus as well as like another way to like recoup card advantage. It actually mulligans pretty well. The mana base is also very good, just being 2 colors with a bunch of dual lands. So I think it's really important to be good at just mulliganing more often. And so this is an interesting hand. It looks like a keep when you just look at it, right? I go like turn 1 Guilty Goose, turn 2 Deadly Dispute, sacrifice the food token. We're off to a good start. The issue is, if my opponent goes turn 1 Thoughtseize, I don't really have anything going on. They take my Deadly Dispute, and Midrange Massacre is not really a card I want in this matchup. Necessarily. That's at least my thinking here. I think I'm gonna revert on that because the way that Trail is important, so is Midrange Massacre, because there's also not much life gain, but there is a lot of ways to kill things. So actually I think Midrange Massacre is pretty important in the matchup, but I don't register that right now. Again, you know, when you're playing a matchup for the first time, you don't know. So actually, I go ahead and mulligan this hand. If I had one more spell, I think regardless of what it was, I would have kept this hand. Or maybe if my these channel lands were more applicable in the matchup. But Seiju doesn't have very many targets, and Takenuma, you know, I'm pretty far away from that actually being good. But maybe if I had like some hives and so on, Colony Garden, maybe stuff like that would have been enough to sway me to keep this hand. But in the end, I decided to mulligan it. Not sure if it's correct or not, because again, I don't have very much practice in the matchup. Generally, when you're against Thoughtseize decks and you try and mulligan into a good hand, that's a pretty bad strategy. You're just supposed to keep as many 7s as possible. But as I mentioned earlier, I really want Trail of Crumbs, right? Like that's one of the cards that it's really hard for Ken to remove and can let me grind through his interaction really well. So I decided to mulligan here because it's a close hand, I think, and I don't have trail. And we'll see if I get a better hand. I don't know, doing the thing again here where I finish my thought process, but now you can see me think it out in real time. Or I guess not quite in real time. I did speed up these videos a bit, which is definitely necessary. I already spent like 10 minutes and we haven't even gone into the game. I mean, I cannot fathom how you guys can watch this, but I'm happy that you do. I do decide to mulligan, and we hit an even worse hand. Like, now it's 5 lands instead of 4. The difference here is, and I think it's a pretty important difference. So, Gilded Goose is not that good of a value card, right? So, like, obviously I would prefer to have, like, Gilded Goose instead of, like, one of these lands here. But I definitely prefer a lot more to have Trailer Crumbs over Deadly Dispute. And even though, like, this can still get taken by Thoughtseize. And these lands do a little bit, like, I still have the Takenuma and the Boseiju, but now I also have Hive and Colony Garden, so that's kind of neat. And I'm gonna return 1 land here anyway, so it's just a 4-lander with 2 spells, and the other hand would have been 4 land, 3 spells. So yeah, I want to get into a worse hand, I would say, overall, but it's not that much worse. And obviously the difference is that now I'm gonna the alternative is mulliganing to 5, which I think is a higher cost than mulliganing to 6. So even though this hand is slightly worse than before, now it's a keep. Plus we have trade-off drums. Yeah, that's a bit of a sequence on this. I return a land here. I return Takenuma. I think I was supposed to return Boseiju. Because there's not actually many targets for Boseiju anyway. And I could draw second, it might be awkward. I don't have 1 Takenuma. But anyway, I decided to leave my tap line, and there is the Thoughtseize. So yeah, that is definitely not perfect. I just run out my Goose here, and yeah, that's gonna like have to do some work. What's also gonna have to do some work here is this Lures. So that's also another advantage of Trail getting Thoughtseize rather than Deadly Dispute, is like I could just get it back with Lures in like not that long of a time. No, his deck doesn't put very much pressure on me. He's just gonna go right ahead with Bone Crusher Giant, makes sense, plays around sacrifice effects, and I draw Soul Guide Lantern. That card is just 2-mana cycle in this matchup, so like maybe some of you would be tempted to just play the Lantern and just draw a new card and try and hit something of value. But it's not really anything of value right now, because like, you know, I just don't have my synergies up. And I think it's really important when playing this deck that you're aware of your lures, and it's important. So I think putting lures into hand pretty aggressively is usually a good line for this deck. Like, we're not under that much pressure, so I can definitely afford to take my turn off here. And the payoff of just having these lures when I need to later down the line is worth more than like trying to hit with my Lantern. Yeah, if you have better things to do, sure, go ahead. But on a turn where like I might just like spend like, you know, where I might just waste the mana or like spend my mana pretty inefficiently, the way that like Soul Guide Lantern cycling is inefficient, I think just putting lures into hand is just like it's just a more impactful play here. So I'm gonna expect Ken here to just play out Bone Crusher, and he does indeed. And I draw Fatal Push. Okay, that can answer Bone Crusher, because the Soul Guide Lantern will provide me with a nice, what's it called? Revolt trigger. So I play this, I draw a card off of it. I'm just pausing here because there's actually another decision here. There's always more decisions, right? And it's actually multiple things, because I don't need to kill the Bone Crusher right now. I can definitely like take a hit from it if I feel like that's necessary. I could try and maybe sweep it up with Massacre, but it's not like Fatal pushes that many targets anyway. So at least it might depend on what I draw off this Lantern. I also have the line that I could play Lures and just bring back the Goose, but I think it's really important that I keep Lures until I can get back Trail, because Trail is so much more important than Goose is. And I would expect my lures to die. There's a lot of answers to it. Lightning Helixes, Fatal Pushes if there's a way to enable them. It doesn't, that's a Vanishing Verse, but there's also like more Bone Crusher Giants, you know. And the Baleful Mastery. A lot of ways to kill lures, and I really want to make sure I can get the most high impact card from the lures immediately in play. The other line that is here, that was actually the reason I wanted to pause here, is how do I sequence my lands? So, do I play out the Boseiju or not? That's actually like a pretty interesting question, because I can get really punished if I draw a tap land here. It could be another Blooming Marsh, or like a Hive, a Castle even, another Colony Garden. I have like, I think 8 tap lands in my deck at this point. 6. I have 6 tap lands in my deck at this point. So like that, it would be really good if I could just like, you know, draw my card here, push here, and then play my tap land. However, I also have black cards in my deck. So maybe I'll get punished by like, you know, drawing a card here and then wanting to play Fatal Push plus another black card. So you just have to think about what's actually in your deck. And the reality is, I don't have that many black cards. I have Cauldron Familiar specifically. Would punish me if I play my Boseiju first here and use that to crack my Lantern. Whereas usually my early drops are like green, like Ravenous Squirrel and Gilded Goose. Obviously Squirrel can be both colors. And I'm not gonna need to cast a second Fatal Push here. I don't have Falsies in my deck pre-board. And then I have stuff like Witch's Oven, where it doesn't matter. So actually like small sequencing things like this can actually matter quite a bit. And it's important to think about like the ups and downs of doing one versus the other. But I do have 6 tap lands, and I only have like 4 cats in my deck. Plus it's not even that bad if I can't play out a cat this turn. Maybe I wouldn't even want to play it out. I probably would, but it's not that big of a deal. So I decide to crack my Lantern here, draw my card, see what's there. Okay, it's a Ravenous Squirrel. Sure, we did not get punished because we thought about this and realized, no, Boseiju still casts Squirrel just fine. I decide to run out a 1/1 Squirrel. So sometimes when you're against decks that have, man, I'm like, have a lot of points in this deck, huh? Oh, this is gonna be a long video, I can tell. Yeah, like last time I talked about, what did I play last time? I played like Heliod, right? And I have like a lot of experience with different food variants, so I have a lot of these thoughts like already like rummaging in my mind that I just like usually don't think too much about, and I just like play them intuitively. But yeah, I'm gonna talk them all out here. So sometimes when you're against decks with burn-based removal, you sometimes want to like sequence your Squirrel in a way where it doesn't get hit by their Lightning Helixes and so on. And I mentioned that when I looked over his deck list. I was thinking about, am I supposed to like do this with my Squirrel, because he has Bone Crushers and Lightning Helix. Is it worth it for me to like try and save it? And I came to the conclusion that no, it's not, because there's also like these like Fatal Pushes and Hidetsuka consumes all, and it's not like when you're against the Phoenix deck, for instance. We'll see that later, but it's really important against Phoenix to get your Squirrel out of range of a shock. And you just like, you know, against Phoenix, I would never play out a 1/1 Squirrel, or at least like rarely. But in this matchup, yeah, it can easily die here, but it can also easily die if I hold it, and I'm gonna like give up like quite a bit of tempo if I just hold this card. Like right now, cannot play Sorin as easily anymore because the Squirrel might just be able to eat the Sorin, or at least like threaten like a chump block from the Vampire, depending on what exactly I have in hand. I guess he knows my entire hand, but yeah, I mean, depending on what I top deck, I guess. So, just having the Squirrel in play definitely matters in certain ways. Just spending that 1 mana now when I can. I'm gonna like, try and like grind with the Squirrel, draw cards off of it. It forces him to react to it, which is kind of nice. Like he can't just like, play a Bankbuster and start drawing cards as well. Because like he needs to remove the Squirrel before it draws cards. So there's a lot of advantages to just playing this out. Also, if he removes the Squirrel, he might not have an answer to Luris. So maybe I top deck a 5th land and I can get that going. So again, there's like upsides and downsides to your plays, and you kind of like weigh the reasonings. But yeah, do be aware that there's definitely like a scenario here where you don't play the Squirrel, but this matchup is not one of them because there's not that much upside to have a Squirrel that's out of range of burn because they can kill it so easily anyway. So I play this one out, and yeah, I mean, hoping for no removal spell, that would be nice, but I'm fully expecting the Squirrel to die here. So we see Ken go into the tank a bit here. Usually when your opponent's thinking, that's a good spot to consider which card you have in hand. Okay, so he suspiciously plays a 2nd White Sauce and passes with 4 mana. Now, I have tested a lot of Alchemy here, and Historic for that matter, and now with Neon Dynasty out, like this just screams Wandering Emperor. How do we play against Wandering Emperor? Well, the card is really powerful if it can come down and then get value out of the first interaction being instant speed. If it can eat something in combat with the first strike, if it can make a 2/2 that gets to eat a creature, or if it can eat a tapped creature. That is when the Emperor is at its strongest. But when it just comes down and just like uses its abilities the same way it would as if it was a sorcery, like when you don't, you know, let it hit things and get value, then the card is very much beatable. So right here, I am not attacking with this squirrel. That's just not happening. I draw a second Soul Guide Lantern, and I could play this and sacrifice it to draw a card, but honestly, I just want to grind value out of my squirrel. I want to try and hit a land drop off this. Oh no, wait. Oh, this is a completely different matchup, huh? I did this thing again. So I have a button on my mouse that basically like skips to the previous video. So let's get this straight here. Alright, well, we're not that far into the game because I've just been blabbering. And he plays his second white source untapped, and we draw a Soul Guide Lantern. So yeah, you could definitely play the Lantern here and sacrifice it, trying to hit the land, and then use the squirrel afterwards. But I think the other line is better, because I want to make sure I get the value out of the squirrel first. And I don't have that many things that cost 2 mana. Maybe the other line is better. It's better if I draw like Trail or Deadly, especially Deadly Dispute would be like much bigger payoff if I use the Lantern first. So yeah, not really sure. But here I'm just deciding to cast in my squirrel. I sacrifice Plant Token because there is Meat Hook Massacre in the opposing deck and in my hand for that matter. And I draw a Witch's Oven. Okay, not perfect, but you know, it's fine. It means that like probably now Emperor will come down, definitely not attacking as I said. And then my opponent will remove the squirrel and I get to make a food token. And you know, that's a nice bit of extra value. Instead, he just cycles a Vitriome, and like, you know, obviously like you feel bad when the opponent just gets to do that, but it's not that bad. And also, he could still have the Emperor, and he just plays a tap land and passes again. So, like, even though it could be like, well, he didn't have Emperor last turn, so now I should attack. First of all, he's had 2 draws to find it. Second of all, he could easily have the Emperor, because Ken also understands that the Emperor is at its best when you get value out of its ability. Being instant speed, like when you get to eat an attacker, because yeah, before it deals damage to you, or even like just gets to use its -2 and then like untap with the Planeswalker. It's so much better when you get to do that. So he kind of wants to lure me into a trap and be like, oh well, I didn't have Emperor last turn, I'm just cycling my Savoy Triumph and just like try again next turn. But I'm not gonna bite. I am still not gonna bite here. What am I gonna do though? Well, kind of in a pickle here. I could use the squirrel, sacrifice the food, same plan as last time. But honestly, I think right now, I'm better off using the dispute on the food. I really want to hit my land drop. I'm falling behind on land drops here, and that's an issue because I have lures, right? I'm trying to outrun with like lures and trade-off crumbs, and these cards are mana intensive. So hitting my land drops is going to be pretty crucial here. So I decided to go with, I think I decided to go with Deadly Dispute here. Just try to hit my land drop. Potentially, I can hit the land and then sacrifice the treasure token or sacrifice the oven or something as well. Again, not playing out my lures before I can immediately play the trail. Alright, so I still don't hit a land. And it's not great. That's actually pretty bad. It's really painful here to not hit the land. But I just decided to play out my trail here. And like potentially next turn I can like start accruing even more value. Now that I have like a lot of the pieces assembled, and yeah, surprise, there's an Emperor. Now I have a lot of the pieces assembled. I have the oven, I have the trail. I really want to try and find a cat now. That's gonna make my massacre better because I can start draining him out. And yeah, that's basically where I'm at. And it's gonna make my squirrel grow quite a bit. So I'm gonna try and go for that. Even if he has Hidetsugu Consume Soul, it's not that bad because it's gonna clear up all the tokens from the Emperor. So that's okay. And yeah, so interestingly, Ken can attack with the token here, and I can just block with Squirrel and sacrifice a treasure to get to eat the token. But it's pretty dangerous against a few different things, like a Lightning Helix, for instance. He just shocked himself here and then like did this, so kind of looks like Lightning Helix, but he ends up taking a lot of damage this turn, which is very dangerous against this deck, right? He took 2 damage from the shock land, and then 3 damage from the trespasser. So pretty happy with that. And I think losing my scroll to Lightning Helix here is awkward, but he doesn't attack, so he probably doesn't have the Helix, is my guess. Anyway, I draw land here. Okay, so first of all, I'm thinking, can I do anything like, can I maybe play my Lantern, play Meathook Massacre, sacrificing the treasure, Squirrel gets a counter, X equals 3, kill the token, and then attack? But I can't like really do that in a good way. What I really want to do is like get the Emperor down to like at least 1 loyalty, preferably kill it. Which I would have to sacrifice my Lantern, exiling graveyards to do that. It's just not a very good play. And I think there's a chance he has Lightning Helix here. He didn't attack, which might be weird if you don't have Helix. But that way I definitely expose my Squirrel to a Helix. So yeah, I'm not actually too keen on that line. Maybe I can later like clear up more tokens if the Sorin ticks down at any point. Like that might be better use of my Massacre. Especially like when I have to spend 5 mana on it and I'm like losing land drops this way. And like grinding with Trail can matter a lot here. Again, I really want to hit a Cauldron Familiar. And if I sacrifice my food to Squirrel here, I get to look quite a few cards down for it. Now, it's not like, it's kind of awkward to like go for drawing cards when you're facing down 2 active Planeswalkers and you don't really have good attacks. I also like can't really like sacrifice some stuff and then attack with Squirrel because he'll just block with this one and then -2 his Emperor. Doesn't feel great either. I'd really like to keep the Squirrel intact and then like maybe later I can go Meathook, clear up all the tokens, and then the Squirrel will kill a Planeswalker in 1 hit. That's the thing I'm trying to set up here. And in order to do so, I really think I need a cat. So I think I end up concluding that I need to activate the Squirrel. Another thing I conclude is that I need to play my land first because there's a chance I might need to tap in a way where depending on what I draw. Like basically I want to play my land first because I'm gonna activate the Squirrel for 3 mana. And can you actually see my mouse in the video? Yeah, you can. And then pay 1 for the Trail. So I want to make sure I keep my, my dual land up in that case. So that's why I need to play my land first. Different scenario than earlier, but it's always important with this deck to think about, are you playing your land before doing anything or after? Because there are tap lands in this deck and there are 1 mana cards of different colors. So that always matters. And okay, we just hit another Squirrel, which I guess I take over a land. Maybe I take the land here actually. I think I end up taking the land, honestly. Because the Squirrel's just gonna be too small to match. Okay, we drew a Cauldron Familiar. That's good. Because I was fearing that the second Squirrel would just not be enough to get the engine rolling, where at least the land, like, it's pretty important to, like, to be able to do Meathook Massacre plus other things. But now I just draw a Cauldron Familiar. I'm very relieved here. And now I can start getting the engine online. Grow the Squirrel quite a bit. The Graveyard Trespasser is not going to be that good of a play because it's going to get exiled by Massacre. So yeah, I just play out my Familiar here, and I'm pretty sure I can navigate it in a way where he does not get to exile it with Graveyard Trespasser. But we have to be aware of this. I can't just like now go for the like sacrifice it to Oven, return it immediately. Because then he has a chance of like Lightning Helix it end of turn, untap and Graveyard Trespasser it. So I need to play like a bit defensively here. Not gonna play my Lantern right now because I might need to use this treasure to trigger my Trail of Crumbs. Like to pay for the Trail of Crumbs, depending on how things go. But yeah, this is pretty good. Oh, and it's Baleful Mastery he kept up. Okay. See, that's awkward. Now the question is, would I rather have 2 food tokens or just draw a card off the Mastery? That is another option I have. And since I think it's not actually that close, because if I sacrifice the Squirrel to the Oven, I won't have a way to sacrifice Familiar, or to bring back Familiar. I won't have a way to sacrifice Familiar in case there's like a Vanishing Verse or something like that to hit it. So, yeah, I think I just prefer to have the land here, to have the extra card. I draw Fatal Push, that might come up against another token later down the line. But yeah, this kind of like messes with my plan, because I was trying to like sweep the board and then attack with Squirrel, but that just didn't happen. So Sorin Plus is here. There's not that many cards left though in his hand that actually matter. Like we know there's like 1 card here from last turn, and then there was 1 just drawn this turn. that are still hidden. But we do have some info about things. Probably no Hidetsukus, right? Oh, and there was a tap land played here, so that's even better. Like, there's even fewer cards that actually matter here. And probably no Hidetsuku consumes all, because then he wouldn't have needed to kill the Ravenous Squirrel. He could just have played the consumes all. Which we could have rebuilt with by playing Luris, play the Trail, by the way, so. As I said, you need to make sure that you have a way to rebuild after the Hidetsuku, but I did have that online. Anyway, I sacrificed the Plug and Sacrifice Familiar, which gives him a perfect opportunity to use Vanishing Verge on my Trail. Okay, you got me. Yeah, now I'm facing no pressure, these Planeswalkers are ticking up, and I don't have my card advantage engine. But I do have a lot of cards in hand, since I've like spent these turns drawing cards, putting Luris into hand. So understandably, I'm behind on tempo, but I'm up on cards. And now I just need to turn it around and try and leverage all the cards in my hand into onboard advantages. Which this thing is pretty good at doing. Probably step 1 for that is to just Meathook Massacre, sweep up this board. He's only at 12 life. So, it keeps passing the Emperor, understanding that I'm probably gonna cast Meathook this turn, so there's no reason to make a token. And yeah, he's only at 12 life, so if I get Meathook going with like Witch's Oven and the Cauldron Familiar, that's like draining 2 damage each turn, which quickly adds up, and it's usually more than 2. Like now I have Freshen Tower. If I find another way to make food, like that's, you know, that can actually be like 4 damage a turn. And yeah, that adds up really quickly. So I do go for just the Massacre this turn, and then my plan is to try and rebuild with Luris, bringing back the first Trail that was exiled. Okay, well there's an answer to the second Trail anyway. But that's at least what I'm trying to do, and just rebuild that way. So Wandering Emperor makes another token here, but that's okay. Like, we don't really care too much about that. I guess there is this Hive, which is annoying because it's gonna exile my Trail. I do have a treasure here, so I just decided to go and push it. And just get rid of that threat. So yeah, like that's actually a pretty like efficient way to deal with the board here. Like I got to clear everything, got a removal spell out of my hand. You know, now I'm ready to like turn things around. Worth noting though, the Sorin is on 7. I don't know if any of you know the ultimate on Sorin, but it's deal 13 damage to any target, you gain 13 life. Okay, well, luckily we're not gonna die to that, but the 13 life that he can gain can actually be problematic here, so I have to be aware of that. I decided to try and bring back my Familiar so I can sacrifice it to Oven again, and just get that extra 1 point of damage. That usually matters quite a lot. Oh, actually like 2 points of damage, right? Because of the Meathook Massacre. And he also took like even more damage from the Sorin, so that's kind of perfect. Anyway, now is the time to play Luris. Again, with this deck, like keeping track of the auto tapper can also be very important. Right now, the auto tapper wants to tap my tower because I have no creatures in play. And it doesn't like obviously recognize that I kind of do have a creature in play. And usually want to keep up some of the utility lands. So you just have to be like aware of this and always like, you know, pull up your card, see which lands are highlighted, check if that's how you want to tap, and if it's not, then you manually tap. Just a good habit to get into. Yeah, you're gonna mess it up a few times, and it's gonna be very, very frustrating, but just keep at it and try to make it a habit. Eventually it will stick. I promise you. I am terrible at habits, but, you know, I never mess up the auto tapper. Like, I rarely mess up the auto tapper these days. So, instead of... Oh yeah, actually the Trail was exiled earlier by the Graveyard Trespasser. So I actually can't get that back. And the reason I killed the Hive was that so that I could at least get the Gilded Goose back from the graveyard. Getting Gilded Goose back here is not the worst though, because it is a food producer. And I have Meathook Massacre, Oven, Cat, Friction Tower to sacrifice the Familiar again. So basically, Gilded Goose plus Friction Tower is kind of like an oven as well. It's kind of like having a second oven. And knowing these interactions is pretty important with this deck. It's just like another engine piece, basically. Obviously much more easy to interact with, but the fact that I can like now do this loop twice a turn, and my opponent's at 8 life. I mean, I'm gonna put him to 4 here, and then I'm gonna kill him next turn. So he needs to interact here. He does have the Vanishing Verge to kill my Massacre, but I have a second Massacre. So actually it's not looking that bad. Except, of course, there is the Soren ultimate looming here. So, 13 life. It's also like not even that bad, but he's probably like, pressured into using the Soren ultimate really soon. And that's incredible for me, because that's like a way I can get rid of Soren. It's for him to just like be forced to ultimate it for like buying a few turns. And he can't even like go after my creatures because I can just sacrifice them anyway. So all in all, feeling pretty good about my spot here. I do have 2 food tokens lingering. I have like, by the way, I also want to notice that I have this lantern here that I don't crack right away. The reason is that I did not think that I could draw anything that would meaningfully affect the board, and he could draw Thoughtseize was like part of it. It's kind of like a loose definition, but there's also a chance that like I need my lands. Like if I have to crack this, I have to like, because I don't want to like act right now. I don't want to like go through my sacrifice loop immediately. So if I don't want to just like bring back the familiar, sacrifice it to tower, and then crack my lantern, and then maybe end up wasting the mana, I don't want that to happen. I would have to use it off the Blooming Marsh. And then again, if I draw something off the lantern, I wouldn't be able to play it without like maybe spending my tower, which I might not want to do. So yeah, like just these kind of small things where like I thought very briefly about what I could draw off the lantern, and it didn't seem like worth it to crack it right now. I might as well like wait and gain info, and that way also play around Thoughtseize, I guess. Just a very small thing, but I think a lot of people might have just started with like play lantern, crack it immediately here, and I don't really think you need to, because my turn was pretty good already. And I like to keep my options open, especially with Fatal Push in hand. I could draw like a Mortality Spear off this, right? I'm gonna end the turn, like use the cat loop, gain 2 mana off the Friction Tower, sacrifice my lantern, and then maybe I could draw a Mortality Spear. And then I'm gonna like do something different than if I used it off the Blossoming Marsh. But now I still have the opportunity to use my Friction Tower for other things in case I feel like I need to. So yeah, just about keeping options open. Anyway, the token attacks, I'm definitely not blocking. I'm not gonna like try and like bring back the cat and then block and sack. I don't need to, I'm at so much life. Even like losing 13 life to Sword. Oh, okay. Hidetsugu consumes all kind of changes things. So in a way, this is not too bad for me, because that's a lot of things dying. I mean, I have to go through my loop right now. And obviously, like, he can respond at any moment with the Vanishing Verse on my Massacre, but it's not actually that good to do that, because I have like these extra food tokens lying around anyway. So he doesn't really gain much from that. I guess he could do it before the Hidetsugu actually goes off, but that's all there is. So yeah, I'm just gonna like, in response to the Hidetsugu consumes all, I'm just gonna go through my moves here and deal like a bunch of damage to him. And it's like a lot of damage, right? Because I essentially have 2 Avens in play, right? With the Friction Tower here. And then like once the Hidetsugu comes into play, it destroys. It doesn't exile. Destroy all things with CMC 1 or less. So that also triggers my Massacre. So yeah, I like, you know, I can bring the cat back like 3 times, which is a lot of damage. Put into 3 life. It's not quite lethal, because the Lurrus doesn't die. But I actually still have the option to Fatal Push my own Lurrus. That's live now because Revolt is activated. And because he's going to be at 1 life here. So if he lets all this happen, I would feel really comfortable about my spot. I obviously also sacrifice my Lantern while I have the mana to. And you can kind of see like the advantage of like not doing it earlier, because this way I actually still now have the mana up for the Blooming Marsh to Fatal Push in second main phase in case I need to do that. And yeah, we get 2 triggers for Midrange Massacre, drains him down to 1 life. And yeah, like the fact that I can now just respond to anything by Fatal Pushing my own Lurrus for the last point of damage is quite a big deal here. So he ends up fearing the Lurrus here. Like Vanishing Verse can't kill Lurrus, so he's going to Soren the Mirthless on my Lurrus, which I think is a pretty good play, because now all my sacrifice stuff has been tapped. And honestly, if I didn't have, if I did not have a Fatal Push in hand, I would have not used my Friction Tower here, because it's pretty important that I can like save my Lurrus from the 13 life. like basically I counter the ability here. But right now I just have a Fatal Push available, so that's I feel like much safer doing this. And this is also why Ken was like trying to go for this play. He wanted to get rid of all my sacrifice abilities, then kill Lurus, gain 13 life, and then try and like get back into the game from that point, which would have worked, except yeah, I'm not falling into that trap. I was aware of this. I can just Fatal Push my own Lurus, as I mentioned, and he can stop this. He doesn't die here because he can like kill my Massacre in response, but crucially he still does not gain the 13 life. And so I can just play my Goose, bring back my Familiar, and it's game over. And just for like extra backup, I'm gonna play my Massacre, I'm gonna play my Goose, I'm gonna play my Trail, and then I'm gonna like try and go for the Familiar. Just in case anything goes wrong, I can always respond. And yeah, he is super dead. So, that's a pretty sweet game. And it's been 40 minutes already? Holy smokes. Okay. Yeah, these food videos might take a while, but I hope that's okay. I hope you can follow. Anyway, now I have to figure out how to sideboard against a deck I've not faced ever before. Always a tough thing to do. One thing that's on my mind is that he's gonna be bringing in the Farewells, so Thoughtseize gains a bit of value, especially since I'm gonna be on the draw. In general, with food decks, I do like to have Thoughtseize on the draw. And not as much on the play, because you can more easily spare the extra card that you have to spend on Thoughtseize when you're on the draw and have that extra card already. I have certain card advantage tool in my sideboard, like the Bloodfast and the Reclamation, but the issue is that they feel kind of slow and they're somewhat vulnerable to his interaction anyway. I do board in Breath Reaver, kind of as a threat, but mostly as a way to answer the Planeswalkers. Planeswalkers are like kind of a weak spot for this deck, so that's why we have Breath Reaver in the sideboard. So that's the only change I've made so far. I've cut 2 Lanterns for 2 Graph Reavers. And I know that I want to board out some number of Fatal Pushes. Question is how many and what I get instead. There's no Rest in Peace in his deck, so I don't need to cut my Witches. It actually seems like a pretty decent card in this matchup. And I think I end up like boarding in, yeah, as I said, like some number of Thoughtseizes. I think I bought out all my pushes because like realistically, they're just like not gonna matter that much. Like, he doesn't have any flyers, I guess, except for like the Sorin tokens. And like all the tokens and so on are either gonna get swept up by his Hidezuku Consumes All, or by my Meathook Massacre. Or by his own Meathook Massacre. So like, the creatures don't really seem to matter that much. They're gonna be easy to jump block for the most part. So I decided that Thoughtseize is just gonna be worth more. And yeah, honestly, like this is a pretty minimal sideboard plan, but you do want to try and keep it minimal sometimes with this deck. Especially when you bought in non-permanent cards. Because Train of Crumbs obviously only hit permanents, so that's why Graph Reaver has a lot of value in that spot. Like, you can recur it with Lurus, and it can be a threat of itself, and it can do a lot of things here. Of course, it has the downside that if you kill Graph Reaver with the trigger on the stack, the exploit trigger on the stack, I don't actually get to kill a Planeswalker. That's how exploit works. Because the creature, like Graph Reaver, has to see the creature get sacrificed before the second ability triggers that kills the Planeswalker. Anyway, now we're on the draw here, and beautiful hand here. Double Trail of Crumbs, like, you know, a Familiar, all you could really want. I decided to like lead on Familiar, which is maybe a bit aggressive because it could get exiled, but it's only 2 Vanishing Verse, and like, you know, then my Trail doesn't get exiled if that happens. And yeah, I'd rather like expose this to a Bone Crusher than expose my Squirrel to a Bone Crusher. It's like a lot better for me. And the upside of playing Familiar here is if I draw Phyrexian Tower, it's so much better for me. When you can go like Tower, sacrifice Familiar, play Trail, and then like bring it back immediately and draw a card off Trail, that's like a very powerful start. Alright, instead I just draw another Blooming Marsh, sure. So I'm just gonna attack my Familiar here. I should have played my land first, I think, but doesn't really matter. Play on my Trail, and we'll see where this Bone Crusher Giant goes, if there's any. It might just like go to my face, honestly, because killing the Familiar is just like not very productive anyway. He just has nothing. Okay, that's very odd, right? Maybe he has the Bone Crush and he's just like not, or like maybe a Fatal Push and he's just not willing to use it on my Familiar. But I'm gonna like try and clock that. But even if he has Bone Crusher here, like not spending it to the face is weird if you plan to play it next turn. So maybe he has like other 3-drop plays, but No, that's not the reality. He just has nothing. No land drop this turn. Okay, now the game has changed, right? I already have a great start, and I draw a Friction Tower. So, accidentally, yeah, I'm just gonna start by playing out the tower here, so I can stop a Bone Crusher Giant immediately. And now I can just play the trail. I don't need to act now, right? I can just play the trail and pass, and then end of turn, sacrifice Familiar, bring it back. Draw 2 cards. So I have like my card advantage engines up and running here, and then like later on I can play the squirrel maybe. But I do have to be very aware of something here. So I'm really far behind right now. I had a great start, he missed a second land drop. Why would you keep a hand like this with like a Mardu deck that like really needs land drops? Well, clearly he has something good, right? He didn't have Thoughtseize. He might have had Bone Crusher. Like he kept his hand. He put this on red instead of white. That's another like piece of information. It's really, really likely that he kept his hand because it has Hidetsugu Consumes All. So I'm going to be very much aware of that card as I play out these turns here. Because at this point, it's probably one of the only ways I can lose, right? If I mess up and overextend too much and don't make sure to keep something back. He just draws a Bank Buster, which I'm really happy to see, right? Like that just like doesn't impact the board a lot. Gives me like more time to spin my wheels and I get my card draw flowing here. So we're gonna see here. I'm gonna take Cursebound Witch. Actually, I disagree with that. I would have taken the Massacre now. It's gonna make it much easier to play around the Hidetsugu Consumes All, which doesn't really help me do that. And like the extra damage I get to deal is just like invaluable. Anyway, I also hit an oven, so like that's super sweet. Now we have like firing on all cylinders here. Okay, the important thing though is that I need to make sure again that I can rebuild here. I have access to 5 mana this turn. So how exactly do we do this? By the way, when I said to take Meathook Massacre, what I wanted to do was just to play it for X equals 0 and just get it out onto the battlefield. I feel like that's worth a lot here. But anyway, I'm gonna start by sacrificing the Familiar and then like see what I draw off of it, because that's going to inform my decision. Because if I have like draw more ovens and so on, like if I draw like an oven and a goose, I can just like vomit onto the board. Because I can very easily rebuild from a Hidetsugu Consumes All. I do have a Passaggio that's definitely not gonna get used right now. And might as well get the second cat here in case the first one gets exiled. We have so many lands anyway. So actually, I decided to do something kind of weird. I made this decision really quickly, but basically, I know for a fact that he has Hidetsugu Consumes All. I'm just gonna play as if next turn he hits his land and plays the card, because that's the worst thing that can happen for me. So I'm going to make the best possible play against that. Also, I realize now, I've talked about Massacre and I have one in hand. Maybe I should just play that over the Graph Reaver, honestly. It's very possible. Or maybe it's fine to wait a turn with this, I don't know. But he's at 14 life, right? This Graph Reaver provides pressure, and it doesn't die. So, and he's like really far away from his Planeswalkers anyway, so just playing out this Graph Reaver just has a lot of value. And I'm playing out my Cursebound Witch as well, because if he Hidetsugu's that, I'm totally fine. I don't want to play out my oven here because I just don't want to expose it. I don't think there's a reason to. And now, like, he can't even really play the card. Because he sees I have another Familiar and an oven and, like, you know, probably, like, more ways to make food. Like, he can see that I can just rebuild from the Hidetsugu Consumes All. And if he plays it here, I get a card from Witch, I get to attack for 3 with Reaver. Like, it's just not a very good spot for him. So, he does hit the land and goes into the tank for a while here. Trying to figure out, like, exactly, you know, how to get back from this spot. Because I've really put him in a pickle, right? Like, you know. And he decided to just play a Trespasser here. Which, at least, the Trespasser can, like, trade from my Grab Reaver. It can also do something else. This is something that I realized at some point during my turn. Which is, Trespasser plus Hidetsugu is actually kind of a nice combo against this deck. Because first, you clear up the cash and all the food tokens, right? After you resolve a Hidetsugu Consumes All, there is no way for me to get back my cat. Then you attack with the Trespasser and you exile the cat from the graveyard. That's a really neat interaction, right? Like, not relying on the second chapter of Hidetsugu Consumes All, because I can usually like set up in a way where I can get my cat back before it gets exiled by that ability. But with Trespasser and ways to exile immediately, it's a lot different. So I'm going to be aware of that. Definitely not going to play my second cat that way. Now there's another thing going on here. He can crew the Bank Buster and just block with it, right? So I'm gonna, but the thing is that if he does that, I can just Meathook Massacre for 3, clear up the Trespasser, so like that way I make sure he can't do the like, you know, eat the cat from the graveyard thing. And I also kill his Bank Buster, which is super nice, like just extra value. And I get the Massacre going, and you know, it's just like all sorts of really good things. So even though, like, you know, at first glance you can't really attack with Graph Reaver here, I do just attack with it. Because like it just makes Meathook Massacre so good. And again, like if I play Meathook Massacre here, again his Hitotsugu consumes all is not very good. Because, you know, I'll still like have all these engines going. So he goes into tank here. Is he willing to, like, he's trying to figure out like why I would attack here into the Bank Buster. Decides that, yeah, just not worth going for it. And this is when I cash in my Witch. Usually that's pretty good to do earlier rather than later. Just to see what I can get. I can get a second oven, that's really nice. The second oven here would let me play out the first one. First of all, I'm just checking like if I can go Vicious Vengeance to kill the Graveyard Trespasser. If that's worth doing. I'm just checking creature types here, but after thinking about it for a while, the Curse of Leeches can also matter here, for sure. But I feel like there's enough value in getting the second oven, because that lets me play out the first one freely. Oh, actually, that's pretty funny. I should have played the one he knew about, huh? Because, yeah, for some reason, this one does not remove the other one from being shown, huh? That's really important. Usually when you have 2 copies of a card in your hand, and one of them is shown, when you play the other copy, the first one will stop being shown to the opponent. There's no like hand tracking like that in Arena. But anyway, yeah, I can just go for the oven here, try and get some more cards, and like see in which way I can rebuild. And I decide to like, I could go for the Massacre for 0 first, but I decide that it's only gonna be 1 damage anyway, so it's probably not worth it, compared to like, let's say I hit something better to do. Again, I think that's a little bit weak. I think I'm definitely like underrating the like amount of chip damage a Meathook Massacre can do here. And I think it would have been nice to just like get it out even before I sacrificed the Curseblood Witch. But now I hit another trail, so I can just play that out, and I have so much stuff going on here. And I'm just trying to think like, okay, what happens if he Hitotsugu second, like, what happens if he Hitotsugus me? Is that even that bad? Right now, I'm not gonna be able to like get back to Familiar, but actually I can just play the second cat now. It's gonna mean more damage done to him, because the Massacre will trigger twice, right? So, actually, like, and he's also going to exile 1 cat anyway with the Trespasser, so might as well play out the second one, because he can't exile 2. And, yeah, it's just a way to like, deal more damage to him, and with this oven, with like the Graph Reaver attack, because like if he wants to attack with the Trespasser here, he also has no blocker for my Graph Reaver. So I'm like really putting the screws on him and dealing a lot of accumulated damage here. And yeah, this way, you know, I'm kind of playing into Hitotsugu second right on purpose. Because if he does that here, it's not that bad for me. Especially since, as you will see, if he attacks with Trespasser here, he's actually just dead on board. He doesn't know that, of course, but because he doesn't know my hand. But I do have lethal right now. Just attack him for 5 and play oven and just do my thing, play a second Massacre, which is gonna like clear up some stuff. I have like oven and the fraction tower plus another food maker, so I just a whole bunch of ways for this to end up well for me. And setting up the spot here where, you know, like your opponent plays Hitotsugu's, consumes all, and then just dies immediately is like a very powerful thing to be able to do. So yeah, you'll just watch me go about my business. If you didn't believe this was lethal, you can just count it up here. I think I actually have like an extra point of damage. Maybe? Maybe it's exactly. Oh, it is exactly lethal, yeah. No, I can play the squirrel as well. Yeah, so 1/1. And then like Meathook for X equals 1. which clears up the things. Or I can just like use my squirrel to sacrifice the cat here, which also is like the extra point of damage. So yeah, he concedes and we get the victory. And I feel so smart. I mean, obviously I got really lucky, right, that he missed his third land drop 2 turns in a row. But I think I navigated that pretty well to make sure that like he could not get back from that. Obviously my hand was really good too, and so on and so on. But recognizing like the ways I can play around Hidetsuku's is pretty nice. Though I do think I put not enough value into the Midrange Massacre, and that I should have played it off earlier. I feel like that would have been pretty good. Anyway, we won the first round of Historic, and now I'm feeling confident, right? You know, I've won in a matchup where like, you know, I've never played before with this deck, and like still felt like I played like really smart. I feel like I'm, you know, up to my old food games, because I did play a lot of like the Jund food versions and the red black food and so on, like what's been in the format earlier, but not this black green Loris version. But now I'm feeling, yeah, it's just the same thing. I know how to do this, you know, I'm pretty good at that. So I'm hoping that I can like keep up that that expertise and energy throughout the tournament here. But yeah, that was the first Historic round. We're now 3-1. Really good start. I'm pretty close to making day 2, which by itself is going to put me in a great spot for the World Championship. But because if you get to play like you get to play 8 more rounds where you get to accumulate points. So day 2 is really important. And yeah, 3-1 is a really nice start for that. See you next time. I didn't quite hit an hour, so that's good. Not quite. Yeah, these videos are long, huh? I hope you learned something though. I guess the biggest takeaway here is the thinking about like sequencing your lands and like trying to like map out like the advantages and disadvantages of your plays. Just very important when you're working with a deck like this that has a lot of unknown information, where you're gonna get to like cycle and like look through cards, and like, you're gonna get to have like like some unknown cards going into your hand, and you have to like figure out how to play with that information. Like, what if I draw this versus what if I draw that? How's that gonna impact one way or the other? And importantly, you have to practice and make these decisions really quickly, because black-green food is a deck that can time out. So I'd say definitely worth it to like try and practice that, and even though you lose a lot to time out early, it's just gonna get you better in the long run to like get those early losses, and then eventually you're gonna be like better at it, and you can train yourself to do the things faster. But first of all, you have to learn to do the thing and learn the way to think, and then you can try and practice doing it in a timely manner. But yeah, see you next time.